Okay. So, in order to understand this, we should understand the structure of the endometrium. We all know that the endometrium is a unique tissue in the human body which completely relies on the ovarian steroid hormones for its growth, survival, and then its removal during menstrual cycle. Endometrium is composed of its epithelial cells, stromal cells, immune cells, and the endothelial cells which line the spiral arterioles in the endometrium. The epithelial cells form a single layer of columnar epithelium that faces the lumen of the uterus. Epithelial cells which invaginate into the stroma form distinct structures with secretory functions known as endometrial glands. These glands are branched tubular structures that develop through the endometrial stroma reaching the myometrium. So let us see a pictorial view of what all is present in the inner lining of our uterus. So we all know, if we see the dark part, you can say this is the basal endometrium, and the upper lighter part is the functional endometrium. The basal endometrium never sheds. It has got stem cells for the epithelium, for the stromal cells, for the vascular cells, and for the glandular cells. So whenever the superficial epithelium sheds, the basal epithelium again starts growing the new endometrium under effect of estrogen. So let us see these all the cells which are present in our normal endometrium. This is the epithelial layer of the endometrium made up of columnar cells. Whatever epithelium invaginates into the stroma that is called as the glandular epithelium. The stroma consists of a matrix and a few stromal cells in the beginning of the follicular phase. Besides this, the endometrium has a large number of immune cells, out of which the natural killer cells, which are the innate immune cells of the body, are in the highest proportion. 70% of the immune cells in the endometrium are the natural killer cells. The stroma is also pierced by the spiral arterioles, which are surrounded by a layer of endothelial cells. Besides the natural killer cells, we have macrophages, the immature dendritic cells, the T regulatory cells. These here you can see some of this is the picture of the T regulatory cell. All of them are going to participate into the immune tolerance of the embryo when it implants inside the endometrium. So we said endometrium functions because of the two hormones produced by the ovarian follicle. As the follicle grows, it starts producing estrogen under effect of FSH. Now, what does estrogen do? Estrogen doesn't act on its own. It acts through its receptors. And in the endometrium, we have two types of estrogen receptors, estrogen alpha and estrogen beta receptors. Estrogen combines with its receptors and directly goes into the nucleus of the cells. So, estrogen receptor alpha is present in all the cells that we just saw. Which ones? We just go to the upper slide. The estrogen receptor is present in the columnar epithelium. The estrogen receptors are present in the stromal cells. They are also present in the vascular endothelial cells and to some extent in these immune modulating cells present in the endometrium. So estrogen is going to act everywhere in the proliferative phase. What happens is estrogen with its estrogen receptors enters the nucleus of all these cells, and what it does is it joins to the promoter region of the cell cycle and initiates mitosis, and therefore the glandular epithelium, the surface epithelium, the vascular endothelium and the stromal cells, all of them start proliferating under effect of estrogen. And what we see as the follicle grows, as estrogen levels increase, the thickness of the endometrium goes on increasing from about 3 to 4 millimeters. The endometrium reaches 10 to 12 millimeters at the peak of follicular size 20 or pre-ovulatory follicle. And what the change, besides the cell cycle or besides proliferation, estrogen with its receptors enters the nucleus and also produces a lot of growth factors like vascular endothelial growth factor, transforming growth factor beta, and also it produces progesterone receptors. So all these cells, initially they had estrogen receptor in which the estrogen receptor alpha is dominating, and now they gain a lot of progesterone receptors. So what we have to understand is, for progesterone to act, estrogen is very important because it is estrogen that produces progesterone receptors in all the cells of the endometrium. So, endometrial steroid hormone receptor expression seen during the menstrual cycle. So, we see a very high expression of estrogen receptor alpha till ovulation, then it decreases, and we see a high progesterone expression after ovulation. Now, why is so much of research going on in the mammalian reproduction? Why are we so vexed about how come, how a trophoblast or how an embryo, which is absolutely genetically different, at least 50% it is different from the maternal genome, its trophoblastic villi are actually bathing in maternal blood. We know that it is a hemochorial. Our placenta is hemochorial. The trophoblastic villi bathe into the blood or the venous sinuses of produced by the spiral arterioles, and that is how it grows. So, uh, how come the mother doesn't reject this foreign tissue or foreign graft? Lot of immunity and good and bad type of immunity is happening in the endometrial tissue, and that is exactly what we are going to see today. Now, for an embryo to implant, the endometrium should get decidualized, and for decidualization it happens only after 5 to 6 days of progesterone. So, on in an estrogen primed endometrium, when progesterone hormone comes and gets attached to progesterone receptors, decidualization occurs. And what is the meaning of decidualization? There is an influx of immune cells, most abundant uterine natural killer cells and macrophages. There is angiogenesis and of the spiral arterioles, development of lymphatics, implantation window surface epithelium, and development of glands and differentiation of stromal cells. Actually, we'll give a better definition of decidualization in the later part of this topic or this discussion. Now, I told you that this embryo is absolutely a different tissue. It is like, we are doing an organ transplant. A new human is being transplanted into a woman's womb. Now, some things are there by which the embryo itself tries to help the mother to allow it to grow inside her womb. That is, our tropoblasts do not have HLA type of antigens on it. These are the antigens, human leukocyte antigens are present on all cells of the human body. And we identify self and non-self through our human leukocyte antigens. There is no expression of HLA class 1A antigens, but there is expression of E and G antigens. So specific placental HLA antigens can trigger a maternal immune response which renders the fetus susceptible to rejection. So we do not have a class 1A HLA antigens on the trophoblastic tissue, and that is why there is some amount of immune tolerance which the fetus itself gives when it is coming or getting implanted into the endometrium. Now, previously, years before, there was a concept of pro-inflammatory and anti-inflammatory response in the endometrium towards the fetus or towards the tropoblasts. So Th1 was called as a pro-inflammatory response and Th2 was called as an anti-inflammatory response. And whichever cells produced interleukin 1b, interleukin 2, interleukin 6, 8, tumor necrosis factor alpha, they were considered to be pro-inflammatory or damaging to the embryo or causing destruction of embryo. And whichever immune cells produced IL-4, that is interleukin 4, interleukin 6, interleukin 10, interleukin 13, TGF beta. Now, what are all these IL 6, 4, 10, 13? In our day to day clinical practice, we do not know what these things are. Trying to go into the details, these are small proteins, or some of them are glycoproteins produced by the white blood corpuscles in response to foreign tissue. IL, interleukin, it is produced by the leukocytes. So some of them prevent destruction of the foreign tissue, they cover it off, and some of them try to kill the foreign tissue. So Th1 is a pro-inflammatory type of immunity, and Th2 is an anti-inflammatory. And what is this Th? Th is a T helper cell present in the endometrium. So if the T helper cell takes the pathway of pro-inflammatory cytokine production, it becomes Th1 immunity. And if it takes the pathway of anti-inflammatory, that is production of IL-4, IL-6, IL-10, 13, then we say this is a favorable condition for the embryo to implant. Initially, there is a pro-inflammatory response followed by an anti-inflammatory response. So when the embryo is trying to invaginate or invade the epithelium, there is a pro-inflammatory response. And once once it invades and it wants to remain inside and grow, there should be an anti-inflammatory response. So maternal and immune adaptation to pregnancy is under modulation of hormones. Which are the most important hormones? First, we need a estrogen, then we need a progesterone, and of course, beta HCG. The trophoplasts produce beta HCG, which modulate the immune cells and allow the embryo to grow inside the epithelium or inside the um, endometrium. So there is, because of these hormones, accumulation of T regulatory cells, there is modulation of the dendritic cells and the natural killer cell function, and upregulation of immunosuppressive molecules in the decidual stroma. The most important cells in implantation are the stromal cells, followed by the immune cells. So this is a immune clock. So there is, see, pregnancy remaining inside the uterus, first getting implanted, then growing for 9 months, and then labor or parturition is a dialogue of inflammation and tolerance. So at the time of implantation, there is minimum inflammation. Again, during delivery or at the time of parturition, there is inflammation. And in all throughout the 9 months after implantation, there is immune tolerance. The mother's endometrium or the uterus tolerates this fetus till it grows for 9 months. So understanding how the embryo implants, let us see that. So we all know that the blastocyst has an inner cell mass and an outer cell mass made up of trophoplasts. And we have the cytotropoblasts and the syncytiotropoblasts. It is the syncytiotropoblasts which are on the outer surface. And we have three phases of the blastocyst inside the uterus. First, there is opposition, then there is adhesion, and then there is invasion. So the cytotropoblasts or the syncytiotropoblasts, they secrete a substance called as lectin, and the endometrial epithelial cells, under effect of progesterone, their villi get converted into rounded flattened structures called as pinopodes, and these pinopodes on their surface have got a, receptor for the selectin. So the selectin and selectin receptor get attached to each other, by virtue of which this embryo adheres to the endometrium. Now we should remember one thing. When estrogen was in excess during the proliferative phase, this whole endometrium was covered by a secretion of this epithelium called as mucin. Mucin was secreted by this epithelium. Mucin doesn't allow the endometrium to implant, or it doesn't allow the lectin and leptin receptors to meet each other. So After progesterone is secreted and progesterone receptors are upregulated, progesterone downregulates the estrogen receptors. Apart from that, after rupture of follicle, actually estrogen levels go down and mucin is removed. The function of mucin could be protecting this endometrium from foreign infection or some bacteria coming along with the sperms at the time of ovulation. So that could be the biological function of mucin. Once mucin is removed, lectin and leptin receptors join to each other. That causes adhesion. And after adhesion, there is an invasion of the blastocyst into the endometrial stroma just above the basal endometrium, till just above the basal endometrium. So here we see this is mucin, then this is selectin and the selectin receptors, by virtue of which the blastocyst gets adherent to the pinopodes. And after that, it invades the stroma. Now what happens, these were the stromal fibroblasts, which are elongated cells. Under effect of progesterone, they become rounded. There they get full of Golgi apparatus and endoplasmic reticulum, because they are going to secrete a lot of substances. So these are now called as decidual cells. They are no more called as stromal cells. They are called as decidual cells. And after that, once the embryo is completely implanted, the epithelium grows over it and forms the small layer of fibrin. So this is a picture of pinopodes formed on day 7 or 8 of progesterone. And pinopodes is a sign that that the endometrium is perfect, and embryo implantation, if the embryo is genetically healthy, embryo implantation is going to occur. Now we see a huge population of natural killer cells in the stroma of the endometrium. From where these natural killer cells come is not known, but they definitely have a very important role in implantation or implantation failure. We need a level of natural killer cells between 40 to 300. Anything beyond that or lower than that may invoke implantation failure or recurrent miscarriages. So here I told you we will discuss in detail as to what is decidualization. What happens? So what are the cell changes which occur during decidualization? What is decidualization? After a well estrogenized endometrium, because of 8 to 10 days of estrogen stimulation, when the progesterone effect comes on these cells, by 7 to 8 days, these cells get decidualized. So what happens? They become secretory. Then the endometrial glands, they become compact. The cells become epithelioid. There is stromal edema. There is stromal cell proliferation. There is differentiation of the fibroblast-like stromal cells into epithelioid cells. And there is massive leukocyte infiltration of natural killer cells and mast cells. And there is remodeling of the spiral arterioles. Extracellular matrix, what changes does it undergo during decellularization? There is increased production of decellularized stromal cells, collagen 4, fibronectin, and many other proteins. That is, these are all the matrix proteins. And there is prolactin, there are integrins. Integrins are actually adhesion molecules, cell adhesion molecules. There are some cell lysis molecules. Changes in the expressions of gene involved following cellular functions are, we know that there is a change in the cell cycle regulation. Progesterone stops mitosis and it increases the cell activity rather than the cell division. Progesterone causes cytoskeleton remodeling, oxidative stress response, then it causes edema in the endometrium in response to steroid hormones, deposition of extracellular matrix, modulation of transcription, epigenetic patterning, post-translational modification, growth factors, angiogenesis. Now, cytokines, chemokines, cell adhesion, cell signaling molecules, all these are small proteins. These chemokines and cell adhesion molecules are glycoproteins. They are sticky in nature and they attract the blastocyst, whereas cytokines are immunomodulators. They may either increase the immune response or decrease the immune response towards a foreign tissue. Now, cell signaling pathways. See, we are going into the molecular biology of the endometrium. So, we know that cyclic AMP pathway, the progesterone signaling pathway. Now, Notch signaling is extremely important for implantation. Then there are many others, the transforming growth factor beta signaling pathway, then the phosphatidylinositol kinase pathway. We will not go into all these details, but we know that all these pathways are producing certain proteins and helping to modulate the immunity in such a way that the blastocyst implants and starts growing. It gets its vasculature and we get a hemochorial placenta allowing the embryo to grow. So we saw initially the picture of a normal endometrium. Now let us see what happens to the endometrial stroma once the embryo gets or adheres to or invades the stroma. So the what we see is the these cells which we saw were what were they? They were the stromal cells. Now they become the decidual cells. We get a lot of natural killer cells, T regulatory cells, then the immature dendritic cells. These are immature dendritic cells surround the tropoblasts of the embryo, and they become immune tolerant. I mean, they make the stroma immune tolerant to the growth of tropoblasts inside it. So let us understand the cells of innate immune system in the endometrium and the decidua with their major reproductive functions. What are their functions? What are these cells? Now, first I told you that uterine natural killer cells are seen in the highest number in the endometrium. So 30 to 40% of the stromal cells are the uterine natural killer cells. In all our body tissues, we have natural killer cells. These are our innate cells. They don't allow foreign tissue to enter our that gland. And so also the epithelium, the uterine endometrium has its own natural killer cells. These are CD56 and CD16 cells. What is CD? These are the surface markers of these cells. So they get, if you put an immune stain, if you put the CD56 immune stain, you will see that that cell is seen. Now they are actually 70% of all the leukocytes present inside the endometrial stroma. Okay. What changes during menstrual cycle? How do we see? I mean, how do natural killer cell levels change? What happens? So progressively, their population increases in the follicular phase, but maximal density is in the late luteal phase in gestational decidua. And where are they placed in the stroma? They are in the arteries and around the arteries and the endometrial glands. What molecules are secreted by these uterine natural killer cells? We have VEGF, we have transforming growth factor beta, we have leukemia inhibitory factor, then GCSF and antigen presenting cells, IL-10. So what is the function? They do spiral arterial remodeling. You know that the spiral arteries, their muscular wall disappears and only they are left with epithelial cells, so that we do not have resistance to the circulation around the trophoblastic villi. If that fails to happen, then we'll land up into a condition called pregnancy-induced hypertension. Then there is enhancement of angiogenesis and control of trophoblast invasion. So we do not allow the trophoblast to go beyond the basal layer of the endometrium. And this all is done by the natural killer cells. Then we have macrophages. Their surface markers is CD68. They form 20 to 25% of the WBCs in the decidua. They progressively increase from follicular phase to luteal phase, and maximal density is just before menstruation. They acquire or they produce a tolerogenic phenotype. Means when there is a pregnancy, whatever are the molecules produced by these cells, they prevent immune rejection of the embryo. So they are scattered throughout the endometrium. Preferentially, they are found around the glands and at the implantation site. They produce tumor growth factor beta, IL-10, and PGE2. Now, what are they involved in? In maintenance of the corpus luteum, blastocyst implantation, spiral artery remodeling, and control of trophoblast invasion, protection of the fetus against intrauterine infections. So, macrophages will not allow any endometrial infections to affect the fetus. Then we have mast cells. They are seen in a very small number. Okay, they mainly produce VEGF. They are not changed throughout the cells, the endometrial cycle, and they are important in initiation of menstruation and enhance tissue and spiral artery remodeling, support implantation and angiogenesis. Dendritic cells are very important in implantation. So the we have the immature dendritic cells, which are known as the tolerogenic, or they allow tolerate us to tolerate the pregnancy. So density of immature dendritic cells in the endometrium is higher than the mature dendritic cells. Immature dendritic cells increase from follicular phase to luteal phase, peak in the menstrual phase. Okay, both mature and immature dendritic cells are found mainly in the basal layer of the endometrium, in the luteal phase, scattered throughout the gestational decidua. They produce transforming growth factor beta, IL-10, and IDO. They are involved in maternal acceptance of embryo, trophoblast invasion and differentiation, uterine remodeling, angiogenesis, and determine the differentiation of T cell progenitors into T regulatory cells. Then we have B lymphocytes, T helper cells, T cytotoxic T cells, and T regulatory cells. I think we'll have to understand immunology to understand all these cells, but our basic knowledge about all these cells, we know that T lymphocytes and B lymphocytes come from the lymphatics. Natural killer cells are present in the tissues from the beginning. Macrophages are like monocytes. Well, so B lymphocytes are CD45 and CD19, that is their surface marker. They are in a very small proportion, just 0.2 to 4.5%. Very slight increase in luteal phase. They secrete IL-10, and we do not know what is their role in pregnancy. We have T lymphocytes, CD45, CD3, 1 to 2%. They reportedly decrease or are unchanged from follicular to luteal phase. They protect from harmful, they are protective or harmful for embryo according to specific cell subtypes. So according to what the cells are producing. So now here we see T helper lymphocytes. These are different type of, actually T helper lymphocytes are there. They are like T lymphocytes only, called as T0. That is, they don't know what function they are going to do, but they can get differentiated into T helper type 1, T helper type 2, or T helper 17, or T regulatory cells. Now what happens is, depending upon what type of stimuli they get converted into, the T0 cells get converted into Th1, Th2, or Th17, or T regulatory cells. And Th1 produces inflammatory cytokines, that is, they will try and reject the embryo. Th2 produces anti-inflammatory cytokines. Th17 is a pro-inflammatory, produces pro-inflammatory cytokines, that is, proteins which will damage the cyto and the syncytial trophoblasts. The cytotoxic T lymphocytes are really bad. They are potentially harmful for the embryo, and they block a successful pregnancy. T regulatory cells are CD4 and CD25. And this FOXP3 is a transcription factor present in the T regulatory cells. And this FOXP3 we have seen through evolution that in hemochorial placentas or in more advanced organisms, this FOXP3 pathway has got activated. So in plants or in birds who lay eggs, their embryo is not exposed to the blood of the avian, but our embryo is exposed to our blood, and this FOXP3 pathway is very important in immune tolerance of the fetus. So this T regulatory cells produce galectin. Now there is now some research papers which say that if you do the levels of galectin in the blood, it will tell you whether this embryo is going to implant or not. Shortly, maybe this might be a test to know the viability of our pregnancy. So serum galectin levels. It is essential for control of excessive maternal inflammatory response at implantation site, involved in maternal immune tolerance to fetal allograft, particularly in early pregnancy, blocks maternal effector T cells, involved in regulation of maternal vascular remodeling. So T regulatory cells are also very important in embryo implantation and immune tolerance of the embryo in the endometrium. I know this is becoming a little hard, but I'll just simplify it. So there are different types of proteins produced by many of these immune cells and stromal cells, epithelial cells, and also by the trophoblasts. So what does the trophoblast produce? It produces human chorionic gonadotrophin and many other of these small proteins known as cytokines and chemokines. Similarly, epithelial cells also produce cytokines and chemokines, again, and cell adhesion molecules. And again, the immunological cells, which we just saw, that is the neutrophils, the lymphocytes, the neutrine natural killer cells, the macrophages, all of them also produce cytokines and chemokines, and each of them have some or the other effect on the tolerance of the fetus as a graft. So now what are the proposed mechanisms, how the embryo adapts in the to the endometrium in natural pregnancy? So there is increased secretion of leukemia inhibitory factor and IL-1B by the uterine macrophages. What happens by that? There is enhancement of embryo attachment to the endometrial epithelium. The transforming growth factor beta production by maternal decidual macrophages. What happens? There is suppression of EVT rejection mediated by extravascular trophoblast rejection mediated by natural killer cells. Production of production by macrophages of transforming growth factor beta, IL-10, IDO, and PGE2, immunoinhibitory and pro-tolerant actions. So what these small proteins are doing in the stroma in order to accept the embryo, we are seeing at cellular level. Why we are doing all this is today or tomorrow we'll get a proteomic chip, or we today already have a chip known as the ERA, that is the endometrial receptivity chip by microarray. So there we are seeing nothing but the mRNA which are responsible for production of all these proteins. Almost 238 mRNA or DNA sites. I mean, we do a reverse transcriptase and we get the DNA, which are actually nothing but the software to produce all these molecules which are important in immune tolerance of the embryo in the stromal cells, in the stroma. So very important, I told you galectin-1. The natural killer cells, they dampen Th17. I told you Th17 is a pro-inflammatory, produces pro-inflammatory cytokines, and they produce galectin-1. So these are produced by the natural killer cells. So endometrial recruitment of innate immune cells triggered by seminal fluid before implantation. They cause the expansion of T regulatory cells. Extravillous trophoblast cells express HLC, HLE, HLA-G, but not HLA. We told you how that we have already discussed how the embryo itself helps itself to prevent immune rejection. So there are so many cytokines. So what are these cytokines? Again, these are small proteins which have specific action, either inflammatory or non-inflammatory or reduction in inflammation. And all these cytokines, they may be decreased or increased. And if their levels are, what happens, they have done a study in recurrent pregnancy loss where they have seen that the important cytokines like IL-1 alpha, IL-1 beta, IL-2, IL-6. So if they decrease or increase, then there is a pregnancy loss. Ideally, IL-1, IL-B, IL-6 should decrease, IL-10 should increase. But we see in recurrent pregnancy loss, IL-10 decreases and therefore the pregnancy is lost. And in recurrent pregnancy loss, IL-17 increases. And that is why, again, that is a pro-inflammatory cytokine and the pregnancy is lost. So for a successful pregnancy, there are a lot of complex adaptations. So these are the dendritic cells and these are the decidual stromal cells. The decidual stromal cells produce galectin-1, then tumor necrosis factor beta 1, IL-15, MIC1. So these are very important factors produced by the decidual stromal cells which help in implantation. Similarly, the dendritic cells are in a tolerogenic state. They produce transforming growth factor beta, IL-10 and IDO. So T regulatory cells are very important in, again, the immune modulation and immune tolerance of the trophoblastic cells in the stroma. Well, at this stage, I think I will make a small halt. I want all of you to ponder on all these things. When we actually do in our day-to-day practice, we see very early pregnancy losses, or we see a non-growing endometrium. We should know at cellular level what is happening. In order to get a successful pregnancy, we know that all these changes occurring in the endometrium should be normal. Apart from that, the embryo itself should be genetically normal and the maternal immune system should be proper. So we see that in certain conditions like antiphospholipid antibody syndrome or in excessive natural killer cells inside the endometrium, we have a very early pregnancy loss and it is really very difficult to figure out what is happening. And a lot of more things are required in the hands of clinicians in order to diagnose whether the pregnancy loss was because of the embryo itself or because of a faulty endometrium. So all that we see in our day-to-day practice is we have a look at the endometrium. We know that this is a nice triple tree-line endometrium produced by estrogens. But in order to achieve good number of progesterone receptors in this endometrium, the thickness of the endometrium should be at least 8 millimeters. When it is lesser than that, probably this endometrium has not got enough estrogen and may not have enough number of progesterone receptors, and therefore we may not get an implantation. In our day-to-day practice, we see endometrial polyps, we see small septae, we see fibroids, and we see adhesions. We all know that there is such a delicate balance between the stroma, its immune cells, its stromal cells, its epithelial cells, and the trophoblasts of the embryo, that whenever there is a pathology, we should avoid transferring our embryos and transfer it in the next cycle after we get an ideal trilaminar endometrium like this with absolutely no defects inside it, because implantation is the last stumbling block in our success of IVF. Do we look at the endometrial flow patterns? A lot of papers were there in order to say that let us look at the uterine artery resistance, let us look at the subendometrial flow, and if there is a good flow in diastole, probably implantation will be better. But there are very conflicting results about this, and a growing endometrium, a good trilaminar endometrium, is one of the best markers that the embryo will implant rather than looking at the vascularity. Now, one more thing. Besides ultrasound, we do some more tests in our patients, and the most common test before doing an embryo transfer is a hysteroscopy. If we see a good trilaminar endometrium, are we going to do a hysteroscopy in these patients? Probably we may not do. If we have no factors, she has no leukorrhea, she has no pelvic pain, she has no dysmenorrhea, then probably we may just say, okay, there is something else, and that doesn't look, endometrium looks very healthy on ultrasound, and we may just avoid a hysteroscopy. But if such a patient comes with an implantation failure, then probably we would definitely like to do a hysteroscopy, because there are so many things which we may just fail to see on ultrasound, like small micro polyps, small bands of adhesions, strawberry sign, that is a hypervascular area in the endometrium showing endometritis. So whenever we see endometritis in the endometrium, we must take a biopsy and send it for a immunostain, that is for CD138. These are plasma cells. These are never seen in the normal endometrium. They are only seen when the endometrium is infected by pathogens. We know that there are commensals in the endometrium, and the commensals are lactobacilli. These are good bacteria in the endometrium. Previously, we thought that the endometrium doesn't have bacteria, but now we know that lactobacilli are present in endometrium, and lactobacilli support the good immunity in the endometrium, unlike the pathological gram positive, gram negative bacteria, which can easily come into the endometrium by attaching to the tails of the sperms. So chronic endometritis is one of the very important reason of unexplained infertility. For years together, we thought everything is normal, everything looks normal. But the fallacious part is because the endometrium is directly exposed to the sperms, and the sperms are directly exposed to the urethra and the urinary tract and the prostate and the glands of the prostate, and many times they carry a lot of gram negative bacteria, and these gram negative bacteria or these pathogenic bacteria can easily enter the endometrium with the tails of the sperm, causing chronic endometritis and therefore failure of implantation or altered immune tolerance of the embryo. So that is about microbiota in pregnancy. There is a microbiome, that is lactobacilli are the normal microbiome present inside the endometrium. Not only in the endometrium, they are even seen in the placenta, and they are also seen in the fecal matter. And in the newborns, in the first fecal matter also bacteria are seen. So there is a microbiota, and we know that we are all living with microbiome. We have more bacteria in our body as compared to our cells. And so metagenomics has become a new branch to understand how we live in harmony with the bacteria, whether it is in the endometrium or in the gut or in the mouth or on the skin or in the vagina. So the good bacteria produce good type of immunity and help in implantation. The bad bacteria produce bad immunity and prevent implantation. About uterine natural killer cells, a study was done which shows that low AMH and endometriosis reduce the uterine natural killer cells. Otherwise, no other risk factor is there, like smoking, increased BMI. They do not affect the level of uterine natural killer cells. Now, whenever endometrium is not growing, there are other studies which have been done, and they have shown that the use of GCSF may increase the thickness of the endometrium. Then, does antiphospholipid antibody syndrome affect implantation? Actually, antiphospholipid antibody syndrome doesn't affect implantation. It affects the or it causes recurrent miscarriage or PIH. And what is this? This is that the tropoblastic villi, which are floating in the maternal circulation, break and go into the maternal blood and produce an immune response, causing vasculitis and therefore rise in blood pressure and clotting in the placenta and in the microcirculation of the mother. What do antithyroid antibodies do? We speak so much about hypothyroidism affecting implantation, affecting pregnancy, causing abortions, preterm labor. What does it do? Antithyroid causes or it induces to, the T0. We told you T helper cells have no work. They don't know what to do, but they will go in the direction of Th2 or Th1. So they or Th17, which is a pro-inflammatory immunity. So if there are anti-thyroid antibodies, they produce Th17 type of an immunity which rejects the embryo. Therefore, correction of hypothyroidism by giving eltroxin and keeping the levels of TSH around 2.5 would be important in patients who are hypothyroid with antithyroid antibody positive. Now, we have seen in our IVF setups that we have put the best embryos, but we've never got a implantation. So if we put more than 4 or 5 blastos and yet we do not get implantation, then there is a question that has the implantation window shifted. Now, normally we know that on day 8 or 9 of LH surge or day 7 of ovulation, there is there is a implantation window. That is, all these molecules required for accepting the embryo as a foreign graft are present, and this window is open for a very short time. If we miss this window, probably our embryo will be rejected. And so in patients with recurrent implantation failure, they have taken out a gene chip where we just studied all these molecules, this IL-7, IL-13, IL-24, and those cytokines and transforming growth factors and so many different proteins, all produced by the DNA of all these cells inside the endometrium. So their signature, their upregulation is checked on this micro array chip, and it tells us, what they do is they take a natural cycle, they see the ovulation, and then they take endometrial biopsies on day 5, day 7 of the post ovulation and day 9, and they check when these genes are highest or upregulated, and that they say is the day of endometrial, or that is the day of embryo transfer. So that is ERA, or endometrial receptivity assay. But remember, this is only one side of the story. We are not checking what is happening with the trophoblast, because trophoblasts also produce many molecules, and so only if the embryo is healthy and the endometrium also has an upregulation of all these molecules, it is then only we will get a successful implantation. So personalized embryo transfer can be seen in some patients on day 5, day 7, day 9, LH day 9. So I think that should be all as a discussion today.
Thank you, ma'am.
Yeah,
You can, I'll stop sharing.
right.
So as always, I can now open the panel to everybody.
Yeah. Any questions?
Yeah. Ma'am, you can now go into gallery view so that everybody may be able to, you may be able to look into. So what I will do, dear participants, I'll be unmuting you. I'll be giving you, sending you a request to unmute. So any questions, please go ahead. You can put it into chat box. Dr. Anujan Shivaganan, I have made you a co-host. Dr. Anuradha Upsinger, I have made you a co-host. Dr. Aradhna Patakkar, I have made you a co-host. So I'm making you all co-host. You can unmute yourself and ask your questions. Dr. Babita Verma, ma'am, you are a co-host. Dr. Sandhya, ma'am, you are a co-host.
I know this is a very theoretical topic, and people are not going to be very happy after listening to it.
No, ma'am. It is not the case because there are so many insights. After the theory, we'll be able to use this. So, Dr. Sandesh Sankhe, I'm making you a co-host. Sandesh Sankhe. You're a co-host now, Dr. Sandesh. You can unmute and speak yourself. Dr. Sandesh? Yes.
Yeah, madam, if the patient on the day, if when you want to do the embryo transfer, and if suppose on the 6-7 day also you see a fluid in the endometrial cavity, now what are the probable causes? Because we do the hysteroscopy, we have done the PCR of the endometrium, no tuberculosis, nothing, endometrial cavity is also healthy. But still around 10 to 11 days the fluid is there and then suddenly it disappears. So is it a sign of endometritis, and if it is there, which is the suitable antibiotic?
Well, what you can do is you can collect that fluid and send it for actually there is a gene chip you get, a PCR. You will not get anything in culture. But if you really want to know whether there is infection or not, there are microarray chips which are called as the metagenomic chips. And they tell you which bacteria are present in that fluid if you want to really know. But I think the common bacteria in our endometrium are either the chlamydia, or in that group, chlamydia group, which respond to doxycycline or azithromycin, or then tuberculosis. And the best thing is we must ask our pathologist to do a immunohistochemistry of the endometrium. More important than just looking at anything, a simple, histopathology, because CD138 is a very important marker of endometritis. Sometimes there will normally be fluid inside the endometrial cavity because of the large amount of estrogen to which you expose your endometrium, either during stimulation of the ovary or stimulation of the endometrium.
Okay, madam. Thank you.
Yeah. And we do get pregnancies. If the fluid disappears and you transfer, you do get pregnancies.
Yeah. And madam, in a transfer, how many days you can give maximum estrogen? Up to 25 days or 21 days? Is there any limit for that? Endometrium is not above 7 millimeter, as well as endometrial vascularization is not up to the mark. So you can continue till 25th day, last to last.
Look, I'll tell you one thing. If you, first thing is take the patient's history. If she has regular cycles, that means she is ovulating. You look at her previous follicular study reports. How was the endometrium? If it was good, just take her in a natural cycle. Don't give her the estrogen that we are using, that is our Proguanova or estradiol valerate. Because what happens is this estradiol valerate gets destroyed in the liver and very less reaches the endometrium. And the endometrium may just not respond. You stop everything and take her in a natural cycle, like do a follicular study, go on doing a follicular monitoring, and you will start seeing a beautiful trilaminar endometrium, because she's getting her own estradiol, that is the real estrogen required for the endometrial cells. And you will get and this will work best. If this is not working, she already has a thin endometrium, her previous records also show that the endometrium was not growing, then we are dealing with a case of a patient who has either Asherman's or a destroyed endometrium. And here her stem cells in the basal endometrium probably are less. And whatever amount of estrogen we give her, it's not going to work.
Ma'am, but in a natural cycle, you have to wait for the ovulation to take place, or you have to wait for the endometrium?
Two ways. Natural cycle, you start looking at the follicle. If it is 18, 20, 22 mm, you keep looking at the endometrium. When you see a beautiful trilaminar endometrium, you start with injection progesterone. You need not wait for rupture of follicle.
Okay, so that once it reaches at 7 to 8.
Yes, and don't go for 7 to 8. Wait little more, 8 to 10.
Okay.
Because
So,
sometimes when you add progesterone, it shrinks. And sometimes when you add progesterone, it overgrows.
so
Both are not good.
madam, once it reaches at around 8 to 10 millimeter or whatever, so then that is you are to consider as a 0 day or a first day of the cycle, first day of the progesterone. What is
When you start progesterone, it is day 1 of progesterone, and day 6 of progesterone, you will transfer embryos.
normal 8 to 10? No, what?
Blastocysts. You will transfer
Oh.
blastocysts on day 6 of progesterone.
And normally this oocytes 8 to 10 cells on the day 3, you transfer it.
Day 3, so day 4 of progesterone.
Okay, and in between, if suppose the follicle ruptures inside, so is it going to?
Doesn't make a difference. You have already started progesterone. It makes no difference.
Okay. And ma'am, there is a slightly out of this, if you want to do the ovulation in stimulation cycle on the first day, there is a problem, because I am not understanding when to start. Suppose my cycle is, you got a period on 1st of the month. And if I want to do the stimulate the cycle on the 20th day, So in a batch IVF, what to start? If suppose I'm getting a period on a 1st, and now what to, if the injection is going to start on 20th, what tablet you should give it just pre-ovulation or pre-cycle?
If you want to do batch ovulation and they are not PCO patients, you give them Lupride Depot.
When?
Hmm?
On first day of the cycle?
No, Lupride Depot, long protocol, 20th day of the cycle. Give everyone Lupride Depot.
Before stimulation, correct, ma'am?
Yeah, put them on long protocol if you want to keep in batch. And if they are PCO patients, you can start stimulation any day of the cycle, whether they get menses, they don't get menses, whatever happens in PCO, you are going to freeze all. So that doesn't matter at all.
So usually what we do now on a first, if they get the patient's first day of the period, we start with the OC pills for 15 to 16 days.
Never give OC pills.
So let her go into the normal, and whenever you want.
Absolutely don't give OC pills. You will,
So
the
that
number
means,
of
madam,
follicles you will get are going to be very less if you give OC pills.
Madam, so that means you are telling us to give a Liprodex on a 1st or 2nd day of cycle.
No, Luprodex on 20th day of earlier cycle.
Okay, and then you can, and then as usual, you can do the antagonist cycle also along with that?
No. If you have given a depot preparation, your LH surge will not occur for 30 days.
So then,
So
ma'am.
you don't do this is long protocol.
Okay, but if I want to give a pre-ovulatory, like suppose on 25th day, we give a estradiol for 5 days, and then you give the injection.
I'm telling you all this, synchronization of follicles is all humbug. It doesn't work. Don't use any estrogen. Doesn't work.
Okay, ma'am. Thanks. Thank you, ma'am.
Thank you so, ma'am. Thank you so much, ma'am.
Okay,
Dr. Sandesh, sir, thank you so much for asking questions. So do we have any other questions? Dr. Geeta ma'am, Dr. Sadhana ma'am, Dr. Sunita Patil ma'am, you are a co-host now. So ma'am, if we are into this session today, which is very theoretical, so next session would be on application on regarding the same thing?
Yeah, I think we'll keep one application session. And then we'll talk about all role of, immunomodulators like steroids, ASA.
Hello, ma'am. Hello, ma'am. I am Dr. Babita from Lucknow. I have a question, ma'am.
Yeah,
Can
tell
I
me.
ask?
Yeah, tell me.
Ma'am, in this natural, like in endometrium preparation, in natural cycle or minimal stimulation if we give, so if the follicle ruptures before endometrium preparation is up to 8 to 10 mm before endometrium follicle rupture, then we have to cancel the cycle, or what we have to do then?
What are you doing? IUI, IVF? What are you doing?
IVF, ma'am.
You are doing IVF, right?
IVF, and I am preparing endometrium for embryo transfer, and I am following natural cycle.
In a natural cycle.
In a natural cycle, if the follicle ruptures before endometrium get 8 to 10 mm, then what we have to do?
See, what you will do in a natural cycle, you will call her on her 8th or 9th day, right? You will look at the follicle size and you will look at the endometrium.
Yeah.
Now, if the follicle is supposing 16, 17 mm and the endometrium is only 5 mm,
yeah,
you are not going to keep quiet. You are going to add estrogens.
Okay.
Right. So you are going to add Proguanova orally or vaginally and call her every day. With as you add estrogens, the FSH levels go down and the follicular growth slows down, but the endometrium starts growing.
Yeah.
And when the endometrium is achieved, now you are not looking at the follicle, you are looking at the endometrium. Of course, in such a case, you will do a serum progesterone level, and if it is less than 1.5, then only you will start progesterone, otherwise you will cancel the cycle.
Okay, ma'am. Okay, thanks, ma'am.
Thank you, Dr. Babita ma'am. And the next session will be on application of today's topic. So do keep in touch with us and we'll let you know.
We are going to discuss about all the immunomodulators, whether they will have any effect on implantation, like IVIG, steroids, then tacrolimus, ASA, heparin, all the drugs which are being used in order to improve implantation, are we justified? And also we will be studying about the microbiome.
Right.
So what heading should we keep, madam, for the topic?
Managing recurrent implantation failure.
Okay.
Should we also mention immunomodulators role in it?
That's all will be discussed in managing recurrent implantation failure.
Managing recurrent implantation. Okay.
Soon we'll fix up a date, madam.
Next month,
Yeah, next month will be okay.
yeah, February 15th or 16th, something like that.
Okay.
Sure, madam. So we can just have a final word, and with this topic we can just fix up a date.
Yeah.
We'll do that.
Actually, today's topic was for everyone to understand the basics. Like if you talk about a thin endometrium, we must remember that our stem cells are destroyed, and the only therapy for that is stem cells and nothing else.
Correct.
The basal endometrium.
Basal.
And whenever we see some RP clots in our early pregnancy, again, this is an immunological problem. There is a bleed at the level of the placental site. And this is usually because of higher natural killer cells. So all that will come in the application, and the application part would be better understood in our next topic.
Right, ma'am. Great. So, ma'am, with this, should we close the session for now?
Yeah, I
We'll
think
give
so.
you the
I think
recording
so.
soon.
Yeah.
Thank you so much, ma'am.
Thank you so much, madam.
Nice
Okay.
listening
Fine.
to you. Thank you, ma'am.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you, doctor.